The change to question 1, paper 1, is that it is now multiple choice. Why would AQA bother to do this? Because the old question was too easy. Nearly everyone scored 4 marks, so there was no point putting it at the beginning of the exam. However, by presenting it as a multiple choice, there is now a possibility for students who do not read well, for students who are rubbish at English, not to get 4 marks. This is what a multiple choice question might look like. What worries Pi about the hyena? This is an extract. As usual, you're only looking at the beginning of the extract, lines 1 to 9 here, and then you're given 3 options. All of these options are potentially true. None of them are just rubbish options, which is great because you have to read the text to get the right answer. And then there's a handy little box for you to indicate which one is right. There will be 4 of these questions for 4 marks. Now, this makes the questions a little bit harder, but also a better test of your reading skills. So I'm giving this change 5 stars. Well done, AQA. Question 3 of paper 1 is undergoing an enormous change. It used to just ask you really to write about the changes of focus. Now, bosh, that has disappeared. You're no longer asked to write about the changes of focus. Let's see what you are asked to write about and if you can still use the changes of focus to get there. So, in blue is the kind of question you're going to get now. How has the writer structured the text? That's the same. It used to be to interest you as a reader. And that was rubbish because students would either go, well, I'm not very interested at all, this is rubbish, or, oh, it makes me want to read on, or it gets me interested. Pointless explanations which scored no marks. So the examiners have cleverly come up with something real, a named technique. So in this instance, the named technique is tension. How does the writer create tension? Now that makes the question easier. You can spot the bits of tension and write intelligently about them. But then, what does the examiner do? Well, they give you these 3 bullet points like before, but now they are much more specific and much more difficult. Because when you're writing about tension, you now might have to write about how the tension increases or how the tension decreases. And then you will write about the other structural features. Fine, that's just the same as before, but what about the 3rd bullet point? Well, now you've got to look at changes in this question, mood or tone or perspective. What the hell have they got to do with tension? I don't know. You don't know. When you're in the exam, these things are likely to puzzle you. So one way to ace this exam is to say, well, no matter what the question, I'm just going to look at the main thing, in this case tension, and I'm constantly going to use the keywords. Increase, decrease, mood, tone, perspective. I'm just going to chuck those into my explanations and hope I get the grade. Now that could work. But also, that is a hell of a lot to think about, and you're trying to guess what is in the examiner's head. This is a recipe for disaster. And so the easiest solution is going to be, well, that's the main keyword, the one at the beginning of the question. In this case, tension. It might be excitement, it might be anxiety, it might be fear. Whatever it is, I'm going to use that keyword every single time I write anything about a change of focus in the text or any other structural feature I notice in the text. So if you keep coming back to that keyword, I think you're going to be fine. If you can fit any of those ones in, great, but don't stress about them. That's easier said than done, isn't it? I think this question is now more difficult, it's more stressful, and so I give this change 1 star. No thanks, AQA. The changes to question 4 of paper 1 might be brilliant or might not be, depending on your perspective. Let me show you and then you can choose. So the old question used to have this stupid statement that they pretended was said by a student. And the other problem with the statement was that it always had 3 parts. So this part of the story where the hyena behaves wildly is funny rather than frightening. The writer suggests that the hyena is actually no serious threat to Pi. So I've underlined the 3 things you've got to write about. On the one hand, that makes it a difficult question because it's a lot to keep in your head, especially if you don't underline the keywords in the question. Always underline the keywords in the question. So that was a potential pitfall of the question. It was just too much to write about. Now, the new question gets rid of the student statement. It doesn't have any made up rubbish. Instead, it gets straight to the point. So, new question. The hyena could be seen as funny or threatening. So now you only have 2 things that you have to write about. A sophisticated answer might still say, yeah, well, it looks threatening. It sounds threatening. But actually, when we look deeper, it isn't actually a threat at all. So this structure with the 3 things and that final idea, it's not really a serious threat, does invite you to write a better answer. Okay, so what does the examiner do now with the new question 4 to invite you to write a better answer? It does this. It invites you to agree or disagree. Now, I personally think this is a massive step forward because with the old question, I basically encourage students to mostly agree unless they passionately disagreed, but really, mostly agreeing was a way to get the marks. Now, the examiner is saying, look, we actually want your real opinion. You can disagree and we'll give you the marks. So this, for me, is a better question to answer in the exam, but only if you are already a very good reader and a really good student of English. So, on the one hand, if you're not academic at English, it's an easier question to write because it's an easier one to understand, but on the other hand, you're given less to write about and therefore it's harder for you to get into the top of the mark range. You choose whether that is better or that is worse. Because of that slight confusion, I'm giving this 3.5 stars, which is pretty good, AQA. AQA are changing question 5, both the description and the narrative questions. Let's check out what that means. So now, instead of there being a description question, we have a creative writing question. And so in that, the picture is not something you have to pay attention to. It is just optional. Now, what's so fantastic about that is that you can 100% use your imagination, if you're good at English, for example, or if you feel, oh no, I've got no imagination whatsoever, I'm a scientist, well then you can use the picture as much as you like. So this gives you fantastic freedom and creativity, even if you're not creative, but more so if you are. It is a real test of English, but it gets better because there is the story question, and that is a better test of English. No writer ever grew up thinking, do you know what, I want to be really good at descriptive writing. They all thought, I want to be able to write great stories, or great books, or great poems, or whatever. Something that is publishable. A story is not just publishable, it is the way we communicate naturally. We tell stories to each other all the time. And so this is a really valuable life skill. An advert to persuade you to buy something is a little story. Buy this and your life and personality will change like this. Beginning, middle, end. Story is life. Story is also the easiest way to get top marks. AQA have proved it because one year they gave a picture that was just so awful, all the students went, "What? No way, I'm going to write the story." And the only time in the history of AQA, marks went up. Students were able to show themselves better. So AQA has said, right, let's make it the opening of a story, like the first chapter of a book. Why is that so good? Because you don't have to stress about the ending. Now, you can just end on a cliffhanger because that would be the beginning of a story or the beginning of a book. Now you can just concentrate on your brilliant characters, your brilliant plot, your brilliant setting. That will all come together. And if it doesn't end smoothly under exam conditions, well, that's life. It's the first chapter of your novel. So, AQA have now encouraged you to become a real writer, and they've now encouraged your teachers to teach real writing. This is fantastic news. How many stars do I give this out of 5? 5 stars. Well done, AQA. Time for paper 2, the new question 2. This question was always a bit of a disaster because of the word summary in the question. A summary means everything you understand in the source. But obviously it didn't want you to write about that. It only wanted you to write about little bits of the source. And not just little bits, just particular things in those bits. It was a very annoying question. So let's look at the old question and see if it has improved. Use details from both sources, fine, to write a summary. A summary of what you understand. Well, I can't write a summary of what I don't understand. That's just extra words in the question that I don't need. And you'll see, in the new question, those stupid words have gone. Brilliant. So, what are we writing about? A summary about the differences between the two trains. Okay, but I'm still not sure. What is a summary of the differences? The new question makes that very, very clear. It just says, what can you infer, work out, about the differences between the two trains? Oh, that's easy. Source A says this about the trains, but source B has something different about the trains. Brilliant. As long as I don't compare things that they have in common, similarities, I'm going to be fine. Am I likely to write about the similarities? Well, not really, because I'm going to underline the key words and the question's short. It's going to be hard for me to miss that I'm writing about differences, whereas in the old question, when I'm writing a summary, I might well write about all the things that the trains have in common, because I'm summarising the train. Stupid examiner. Now, clever examiner. This change makes it much easier to focus on what goes in to give you the right answer. And I'm giving this change 5 stars. Thank you, AQA. Question 4 of paper 2 has always been a horrible question. Let me take you through what it used to look like and then show you the magnificent change. But is that change enough? So the question would typically say, for this question you need to refer to the whole of source A and the whole of source B. That is still exactly the same. Good test of English. You don't have to just find a little bit in the source and get penalised if you quote something from the wrong bit. That bit's good. Compare how the writers convey their different feelings and perspectives about their experiences of travelling on a train. This is where the question is awful, because this one focuses on differences. I think the 25 paper, which I sat, focused on similarities. Now, this is a massive problem because you can be a brilliant student of English and notice lots of great comparisons, but if there's similarities, you get no marks for them, and worse, you lose marks because you weren't writing about the differences. Now that's not a test of English, it's a test of whether you have fully read the exam question and done exactly what it asked. That makes the question stupid. It is a rubbish test of English because people who are good at English could still score really badly writing about the wrong thing. A better question would just be compare the perspectives and feelings about the experiences of travelling on the train. Then you could find similarities, you could find differences, you could be perceptive, you could make inferences, and it wouldn't matter whether things were similar or different. That is a fairer test of whether you're any good at English. In the new question, does that change? No. AQA have left that exactly the same. The one change happens in those 3 bullet points at the end of stuff that you could include, and that at least is a better change. So in the old one, you had to compare the methods the writers use. So this writer uses similes to blah blah blah, whereas this writer uses similes to blah 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 blah. Or this writer doesn't use similes, they use metaphors or alliteration instead of similes to do blah blah blah. And that is annoying and artificial. So now it's improved. Now you just have to comment on the methods. Oh, I notice the writer in source B is using a simile to describe this train, and that makes the reader think blah 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 blah. Brilliant. Whereas in the other source, the writer uses a personification to describe the train as blah blah blah, and the effect of that makes us see the train as blah blah. Yeah, so that's much more natural. I just have to mention the method when it's there to explain the effect on the reader. I don't have to say, oh, and that method is different from the method that the writer used in the other extract, and this is important because frankly it wasn't important that it was different or that it was the same. It's just annoying. So that bit is excellent, but a good student could still lose loads of marks by writing about the wrong thing. And I had literally dozens of students write to me this year and say, oh my God, I wrote about differences instead of similarities. Are the examiners going to screw me over? And the answer is, because every question is marked 50% inaccurately, that is Ofqual's own research, it's a coin toss whether you get the right grade, and that meant thousands of students every year lose their grades because they might include both differences and similarities in a question that only asks for one. The other main problem of this question is that you have to write so much to get full marks, and AQA hasn't done anything to alert students to that. So I'm giving this change 2 stars. Meh, AQA. I will be producing exam answers to all of these questions, and they will all be marked by a senior examiner. The link will be in the description. Check it out.